So over the last probably 5, almost 6 years of doing this podcast, I've been asked repeatedly, will you let somebody interview you to tell your story? This is Band Stories. And of course, the same thing's coming through on the YouTube channel. What about your story? And so I've had several people say, hey, I'll interview you. But for some reason, the timing just never worked out. And I finally thought, as long as we're doing this new accelerated frequency of the podcast and the postings on the YouTube channel, why don't I go ahead and do it now? And so, in a way, I'll interview myself. I'm going to tell my story, and I think there are people who hopefully will appreciate it and learn something. I've always used it when I'm teaching on BAM anywhere in the world. Frankly, I've told my story, not because it's my story, but because it does give context to what I teach. I didn't learn BAM in school. I didn't learn business's mission from a book. I did not go to the desert of Arabia to learn it, though I called it. But I've learned BAM sort of in a series of revelations, a series of illuminations over the years as part of my journey of walking with Jesus Christ. And so that's why I share it. And I do think it helps people understand a little bit about, where's this guy coming from? So let me start with the very simple beginning. Of course, I came to Christ when I was in college. I grew up as a sort of a partially church-going, God-fearing kid. My family would have been described the same way. We weren't Christians. We did not know Jesus Christ in a personal way. We did not know the message of salvation. And I'll be fair to the church I grew up in. I had no doubt it was there. The gospel was there. I just didn't see it. I just didn't hear it because for whatever reason, God had not chosen to open my eyes at that point. But when I was 19 and at the University of Tennessee, the Lord began to work on me in ways that I wasn't originally or initially aware of, building within me two things: a great dissatisfaction with life, which for a 19-year-old kid is like, how much can you be dissatisfied with? But the other is as I began to start searching, and I tried everything from going to live in the mountains and hiking in the mountains and trying to discover the John Denver Rocky Mountain High to just contemplating life, as a college student. And that was a great search. But in the midst of that, I also began to see that what was wrong with me was not a horizontal thing. It wasn't something just me. It certainly wasn't just me and other people. I began to see my dilemma and my challenge is a vertical challenge, that I did not have a relationship with my Creator, and that I had sinned against this Creator. I didn't even understand what that meant. I knew I'd done wrong things, but now I began to see them in the light of me and the living God. And of course, the good news was He wasn't mad at me. He wasn't looking for a reason to stomp me into the dirt and flick me off into an eternal torment. He was seeking to save me. He was seeking to bring me to Himself. And during that time, two things happened. God was at work. One was a Christian guy by the name of Richard just became my friend. And he was very wise. He didn't push the gospel. I knew he was a believer. Wasn't sure what that meant, but I did recognize that there was something different about Richard and his life, his joy, his sense of understanding of what was going on in the world. And I knew he was a Christian. Again, not quite clear what that meant. And he also was very wise in not witnessing to me. He didn't come in forcing the gospel down my throat. He prayed. He loved me. He was my friend. And that was the context that God used to begin to draw me directly to Himself. About the same time, a fellow from Campus Crusade for Christ came in one of their infamous cold calls. This is back in the early 1970s. And they would do door knocking in college dormitories, and they knocked on my door, and a fellow by the name of Bill Rogers asked me if he could come in and share the, quote, air quote, 4 spiritual laws, which again, I had not heard of. But I said, sure. Yeah, I mean, he didn't know I was dealing with anything, and I didn't know what he was bringing to me, but it just seemed right. So I invited him to come in, and as he shared the 4 spiritual laws, the gospel began to make sense to me for the first time ever. I understood clearly I was a sinner separated from God by my failures, but that God was seeking to bring me to Himself, and that He provided for this in the work of Jesus Christ, the death, burial, and resurrection of His Son, and that if I would believe in Him, truly believe in Him, that I would have everlasting life. And so it made perfect sense. And at the end of the 4 spiritual laws, there's a question in the script, and Bill asked it, does this make sense to you? And I said, yeah, it really does. It makes perfect sense. And he asked the next question in the script, and he said, well, are you willing to commit your life to Christ? And he was expecting me to say yes, and I said, no, I am not. And he asked me gently. Bill he had a lot of wisdom too. He asked me gently, why? Why won't you commit your life to Christ? And what I said to me was a revelation. I said, well, Bill, if I commit my life to Jesus Christ right now, this is the end of me. And I knew this was the end of Mike Baer as he had been up to that point, and the beginning of something entirely new. And that's a big deal. And so in a sense, I was sort of counting the cost of discipleship. And he said, well, okay, great. I understand that. I'll pray for you, and thanks for letting me share. So it was great. We parted friends. Well, what he didn't know is I immediately went to Richard, who had earned my trust, and said, Richard, this is what happened. This is what this guy said. This is what I think it's right. Is it really true? And he said, it's absolutely true. And so about, 4 or 5 days later, I was by myself in my dorm room. I knelt down by my bed alone, and I said, Lord, you are who you are. You died for me. I need a Savior, and you are that Savior. Take my life. And he did. And I literally, as you've heard so many times, other testimonies, I got a new creature. And it was just the beginning of something that has been an amazing journey of struggles and victories all at the same time, but an amazing journey nonetheless.